He once crawled through a hail of bullets in Quang Tri, survived 2 full tours in the Vietnam War, but he broke down because of fireworks on the 4th of July. Why would a soldier like that fear the lights and sounds of peace more than the chaos of war? You see, most people think war ends when the guns fall silent. But for many veterans like Raymond Foster, war begins the moment they return home. There are battles that don't happen out there, but burn silently year after year inside the mind. They call it PTSD, but for PTSD war veterans, it's not just a diagnosis, it's a world they're trapped inside. Raymond, now 74, used to be a scout. He led the way during missions, slipping silently through jungles, tracking the enemy, bringing back vital intel to protect his unit. He survived 2 deployments to Vietnam, something not many did. But what most people don't know is, Raymond never truly came back. Last July 4th, in a small suburban park, as the fireworks lit up the sky, Raymond suddenly screamed, "Stop! Stop shooting!" and collapsed, his body trembling, arms wrapped tightly around his head. People backed away. A child started crying, and Raymond disappeared into a different world, a world where Daniels, his best friend, died saving him. A world where fireworks weren't celebrations, but landmines, mortars, and the screams of wounded comrades. In Raymond's mind, Independence Day isn't about freedom. It's the day when memories come back louder than gunfire. And when those bright bursts split the night sky, he doesn't see America. He sees the battlefield at Quang Tri. No one saw a hero that day, just an old man, panicking in a crowd. But did anyone know he once was a brave soldier who saw too much to ever sleep peacefully again? No one ever talked about PTSD treatment back in his day. They just said, "Be strong." But he had been strong for far too long. So long that it shattered him. His family didn't understand. His wife endured for a few years, then left. His son feared him more than loved him. They saw him smash a glass when an ice cube dropped too loud. Saw him hide under the table during a thunderstorm. Eventually, Raymond chose to leave them before they could leave him. He became a homeless veteran, not because he had no roof, but because nowhere felt like home. He lived in a rundown motel by the train tracks, where the sound of passing freight drowned out the echoes in his head. Each day, he wandered to the public library, the only place no one asked questions or pitied him. One morning, while he sat quietly in a corner, a little boy approached. "I drew this for you," the child said, handing him a crayon sketch of a soldier standing beneath fireworks, saluting, the American flag behind him. Raymond smiled, but his hands trembled so badly he dropped the drawing. He backed away, eyes blank, not from emotion, but because that little boy had unknowingly recreated the exact moment Raymond spent a lifetime trying to forget. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, where the flickering heater light reminded him of bunker signals, the smell of rust, the smoke, the gasping breath, Daniels calling his name one last time, the final embrace, eyes wide open, then silence. He buried his face in his hands. Each year he relives that night dozens of times. No one strikes him, no bullets fly, but PTSD people like Raymond still feel the pain, as real as the day it happened. One afternoon, while sitting alone on a park bench, he met an older woman, faded tattoo on her hand, Semper Fi. "Field nurse," she said, noticing his curious glance. "I hate fireworks too. They sound more like bullets than joy." Raymond didn't respond, but in his eyes, for the first time in years, there was something new, understanding. She brought him to a small PTSD treatment center, a quiet refuge for veterans with nowhere left to turn. There, Raymond met soldiers younger than him, older than him, men who'd once slept under bridges, clutched rifles in their sleep, avoided every crowd. They didn't look at him like a broken old man. They understood him, because in a way, they were him. And that was the first time in nearly half a century that Raymond opened his mouth to speak of the 1969 ambush, of the deaths he couldn't prevent, of the sounds that still haunted his dreams, of the real reason why he feared fireworks more than gunfire. No one judged. No one told him to be quiet. And in that silence, something began to heal. If you've ever thought PTSD was just a distant diagnosis, remember, there are thousands of veterans like Raymond living among us, but never truly leaving the battlefield. If this story touched you, stay with us, because his journey is just beginning. He used to think he was the only one who panicked at the flash of fireworks, until he met a Marine who cried like a child when a balloon popped. At that little PTSD center tucked deep inside a state park, Raymond began learning something the military never taught him. Surviving doesn't mean you've lived. The veterans around him, young, old, black, white, Latino, even women, each carried their own battlefields. No one spoke loudly. No one laughed too hard, but every glance held wounds no doctor could ever stitch. It wasn't just a treatment center anymore. It was a sanctuary for PTSD people trying to stand after the storm of memory. There, Raymond met Marcus, a counselor, a war veteran from Fallujah. 30 years younger, but with eyes that had seen too much. Marcus never pushed him to talk. He just sat nearby, sometimes nodded. Then one day he asked, "Would you like to talk about that night with the fireworks?" Raymond stared at the blank wall. After a long silence, he whispered, "I don't remember it clearly, but I remember the smell of gunpowder and the feeling that I might not survive the night." Marcus didn't answer. He just scribbled something and handed it to Raymond. "Every time you tell the story, you take back a piece that PTSD stole." The next day, Raymond returned with a small notebook. On the first page, in shaky handwriting, July 18, 1969, The Ambush, Quang Tri. From that moment, he began to write, not to publish, but to remember, to call out the names of faces that had long faded, the people he once thought were buried with time. Turned out to still be alive in his nightmares every single night. He wrote about Daniels, the friend who threw himself on a grenade so Raymond could live. About Riley, a 19-year-old kid who couldn't sing to save his life, but never stopped smiling. He died just 3 weeks after landing in Vietnam. And about Taylor, the only one in the unit who carried a Bible and read from it whenever rain clouds gathered. One night, while writing, Raymond stopped and broke down in tears. He realized he wasn't crying for what he had lost. He was crying because, after all these years, he could finally remember without running away. A week later, Marcus encouraged him to join a support group where PTSD war veterans shared their stories. At first, Raymond refused. "I'm not the kind of guy who sits in a circle and talks," he said. But then he tried, just sat and listened. One young soldier said he couldn't go to the movies. The deep bass of the speakers made him curl up in fear. A widowed mother shared that her husband, an infantryman in Iraq, never slept at night because that's when the attacks usually came. Then a man in his 50s, buzz cut, choking back tears, admitted he had been homeless for 6 years, not because he lost a job, but because every time he heard a police siren, he thought he was back in combat. Raymond said nothing that day. But when he got home, he opened his notebook and wrote one line, "I'm not crazy. I'm not alone." The next day, he brought one of his old letters, the one he wrote to his mother in 1971 but never sent. In it, he had written, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm fine." But in the bottom corner of the page, scribbled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "I'm scared, really scared." Marcus looked at him and said, "That's the beginning of PTSD treatment, not the meds, not the machines, the truth." From that day forward, Raymond showed up regularly. No more hiding. No more pretending he was okay. He began to admit to himself that he was a survivor, but not someone who had healed. One day, a group member named Jerome, a man who once slept in the back of a truck for an entire year, invited Raymond to a veterans memorial the following week at the National Cemetery. "No fireworks," Jerome said, "just candlelight." Raymond hesitated, but then he went, not to be honored, but to see if he could stand among the names of the fallen without falling apart himself. When he placed his hand on the stone that bore Daniel's name, he said nothing. But in his heart, a voice whispered, not goodbye, but a promise. "I'm still living for you, and this time I'll live fully." That night, Raymond didn't go back to his room right away. He walked slowly through the cemetery, lit softly by the glow of hundreds of candles. No one talked, no one clapped, just a silence so profound, so respectful, it was a kind of quiet he hadn't experienced since the war ended. And he realized silence didn't scare him anymore. Somewhere in America, every day, homeless veterans are struggling just to exist. PTSD people are choosing between medication and a night without blood in their dreams. Old men sit silently in libraries, and no one knows they were once heroes. Raymond used to be one of them, but now he's learning to stand tall again, to lift his head and to breathe. as if life is something he finally believes he deserves. He practiced standing through fireworks by locking himself in a dark room every night and playing fireworks videos for 10 minutes, not to punish himself, but to prepare for a day when he wouldn't have to run. Raymond didn't know why he agreed. Maybe it was because Jerome said, "You don't have to go to prove anything to anyone, but if you want to really live, then you have to face the one thing that scares you most." Or maybe, deep inside, the part of him that had survived everything just wanted to know if it was possible to look up at a sky full of fireworks and not fall apart. The 4th of July was approaching. A nearby stadium was planning a big veterans tribute, music, performances, words of gratitude, and of course, fireworks to close out the night. Everyone at the treatment center knew. For Raymond, it wasn't a celebration. It was a battlefield, a psychological war with no guns, no enemy troops, just him and a fear so old it felt fossilized. 3 weeks before the event, Raymond began to prepare. Every night he locked his door, turned off the lights, and played fireworks videos, loud enough to trigger the panic. He sat upright, hands on his thighs, eyes open. His body shook, his heart pounded. Sweat poured like it did in the jungle under armor. Some nights he had to crawl out of the room, gasping on the floor. But each time he came back. On the 7th night, he didn't have to cover his head. On the 10th, he could take deep breaths. On the 15th, he wrote in his journal, "I don't see Daniels dying anymore when the flares burst. I just see light. I'm still afraid, but I know I'm here, now." Marcus called it self-directed PTSD treatment, not a replacement for medicine or therapy, but a way for a PTSD person to take back control from fear instead of letting fear control them. Still, the fear wasn't just about the fireworks. It was about something far more invisible, his own memory of what he couldn't change. As the holiday neared, Raymond started dreaming about Daniels again. Not about his death, but his eyes, the disappointment. One night, Raymond dreamt he was walking through the stadium, the crowd cheering, and suddenly all the lights cut out. Everyone turned to him, their eyes empty, mouths moving in unison. Why do you get to live when they didn't? He woke up in tears. That guilt, the survivor's guilt that haunts thousands of PTSD war veterans, returned stronger than ever. He went to the center and told Marcus, "I don't deserve to be honored. I'm not a hero. I'm a survivor, but I didn't save my friend." Marcus stayed quiet for a long time, then finally said, "I used to think that too, until an older soldier told me, if you had died with them, who would tell their story?" Raymond hung his head, heart heavy. But he knew Marcus was right. The fallen could never return. But if he lived, so could their memory. 3 days before the event, Raymond visited the stadium early. He walked around, scouted every corner. He marked the closest exit, the quietest area, the spots where he could retreat if needed. He wasn't trying to look brave. He was preparing for battle, the way PTSD people always must, preparing to survive what others take for granted. The night before the celebration, Raymond sat alone on his bed, staring at an old yellowed photo. A squad of grinning recon soldiers, torn uniforms, but eyes full of fire. He gently placed his hand over Daniel's face. "Tomorrow I'm going out there, not for the applause, but to show you I'm still alive." And then the day arrived. He wore a white shirt, the best one he had, his old shoes cleaned and polished. In his hand he held a folded letter, not to read, but as a reminder to himself that once he wrote home from the battlefield, and now he was writing the final chapter of his own story. The stadium was packed, flags waving, music blasting, people cheering, clapping. But all Raymond could hear was his own heartbeat. He walked slowly toward the section reserved for veterans. When the speakers called his name, a spotlight beamed down. Veteran Raymond Foster, 2 tours in Vietnam, Reconnaissance Battalion, 101st Division. Honored for his service and his courage to survive both the war outside and the war within. Raymond stood. He didn't bow his head. He didn't cover his face. He looked up, not to show off, but to face the memories that once broke him and say, "I'm still here. I didn't disappear." And when the fireworks began, he didn't run. He didn't collapse. He didn't scream. He sat still, eyes wide open, watching the bursts of light tear through the night sky. To someone else, it may have looked like he was enjoying the fireworks, but really, he was surviving each explosion. 15 minutes later, when the last boom echoed and the crowd roared, Raymond closed his eyes, A single tear rolled down his cheek, not from fear, but from relief. He had won, not the war, but himself. Somewhere in this very city, hundreds of homeless veterans still haven't heard anyone call them heroes. Some PTSD people still fight silent wars every day, praying that someone, somewhere might understand them. Raymond's story isn't some grand epic, but it's real. A quiet journey, without fanfare, without medals, built on the courage it takes to simply keep going, even when your mind feels shattered by the past. After 50 years of surviving in silence, he stood beneath fireworks, not in fear but in tears, because for the first time he felt alive. The day after the ceremony, Raymond woke before sunrise. No jolt, no cold sweat, just birdsong through the window and a strange, unfamiliar feeling, peace. He strolled through the neighborhood. Everything looked the same, buses rolling by, shops opening, kids laughing. But for him, something had changed. For the first time in decades, Raymond didn't feel like a stranger in the world around him. Not an invisible veteran no one remembered, not a PTSD sufferer hiding from noise and light, but a man, alive, present, worthy. After that night, he returned to the support center each week, this time not for healing, but to help others heal. Marcus told him, "You can be the one who keeps the fire burning for those still stuck in the dark." And he did. Not with speeches, but with stories, fragments of memory, moments of quiet sitting beside someone mid-panic, just letting them know they weren't alone. He met a young soldier fresh back from Afghanistan who couldn't stand the sound of a bus horn. "I'm scared I'm losing my mind," the soldier said. Raymond replied, "If you're scared, it means you still feel. And if you can feel, you're not gone. That's a better start than most." He found a homeless man who had slept under bridges for 8 years, carrying PTSD, but never once stepping into a clinic. Raymond brought him to the center. 2 months later, they walked through a park together, where that man once trembled at the sound of a ball popping. Now, he looked up at the sky without flinching. Everyone Raymond touched. He didn't save them, but he helped them believe that they were worth saving. He began writing more, not just for himself, but for the ones who never got the chance to tell their stories. He wrote about Daniels, the young soldier who died in his arms, about rainy jungle nights where they sang and shivered, unsure if they'd live to see morning, about what it feels like to survive a war and still wonder if you ever really came back. A small publisher found a few pages shared through the therapy group. They offered to print it as a book. Raymond declined. "I don't need to be famous," he said. "I just want someone out there to read this and know they're not crazy, not weak, not alone." But then he agreed to print a single edition, free copies for veteran centers. The book was titled, "I Survived, But I Never Got to Live." A few months later, he received a handwritten letter from a young man in Ohio. "I had planned to end my life, but after reading your story, I went to see a doctor. I'm still here. Thank you for giving me the courage." Raymond didn't cry. He simply folded the letter, placed it beside the old photo of his recon unit, and whispered, "This time, no one died in silence." He continued attending memorials, not to be honored, but to be present. To sit beside those still too afraid to speak, to say the things others couldn't. And every 4th of July after that, Raymond no longer shut his doors. He sat on his porch, headphones on, eyes open as the fireworks lit up the sky. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he placed his hand over his heart and closed his eyes. But he no longer screamed. He no longer ran, because he had made it through. No one can say PTSD ever fully disappears. No doctor will promise that. But healing doesn't mean erasing it. It means learning to live with it, without letting it consume you. Raymond, a once homeless man who feared even applause, who dreamed of death each night, lived to be 75. Not perfectly, but bravely. He no longer saw himself as a victim of war, but as a witness, one who could walk beside other survivors so they'd never have to walk alone. If you're watching this and know someone who's been to war, who lives in the shadows of PTSD, who feels like they don't belong anywhere, please share this story. And if you feel like Raymond once did, don't stay silent. You're not alone. There's a community out there where PTSD war veterans, homeless survivors, and people carrying deep wounds are learning to heal together. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Hope Street, because here we tell stories like Raymond's, to light a candle of hope, one soul at a time, for those who once thought they were lost forever.